Welcome to the ARC Entrepreneur Podcast, the podcast where ideas ignite, clarity strikes, and those aha moments are born.
We're not just talking about business, we're sparking connections and uncovering real solutions for real entrepreneurs.
We'll sit down with the experts and business thought leaders and shine a light on the everyday entrepreneurs, the ones grinding it out in their shops, offices, even their living rooms.
Whether you're dreaming of launching the next big tech startup, growing a side hustle, or just finding smarter ways to support your family, this is the place for you.
So let's spark something great together. Welcome to the ARC Entrepreneur Podcast. Let's dive in. And welcome to the ARC Entrepreneurs Podcast. I am Dan Callahan here with Derek Stone. How you doing, Derek?
Man, I'm doing perfect.
I got to come up with something better than going, how you doing, Derek?
No, I think it works.
Unless that's just my phrase now. I like it.
Yeah, you just got to stick with one thing. It works.
Stop changing it up. I know.
Stop changing it up.
I'm sorry. I'm always trying
I was
to
waiting
improve.
on it.
You wouldn't know what to do.
And I was like, where are we at?
What's happening this week? I
have
don't know
no
what
idea.
to say. Did you have a good week?
Yeah.
I asked that knowing the answer, but
it could have been worse, but it also could have been better.
I
tell you why. Let me just tell you why. I played a round of golf with somebody.
You play golf?
Well,
or do you just have clubs?
I got these golf balls, and they have a magnet inside. It's called a tree magnet. When you hit them, they, for whatever reason, can go right to a tree.
Oh, I see.
And then you hit it again, it goes right to another tree.
I thought, yeah.
You know, and another tree. And
tree finding a long time ago used to be a skill.
Yeah. In the course I played at, luckily, they cleared out a lot of trees, but not enough of them.
Right.
So I had a plan to have a good week.
It just started off that way.
That one just went way downhill. So, I mean, it's uphill from here now.
Well, I have golf clubs. I've seen a lot on social media. Have you seen? I don't know what they're called. They pop. They make like a huge, like a gunshot noise.
Oh, yeah.
When you hit them.
Yeah.
I don't think they're allowed on most courses. But
most.
if you want a really short round, just use that on the first hole.
Oh yeah.
They'll probably come after you.
I know somebody who would probably do something like that.
Well, I've had a pretty good week. Thanks for asking.
Oh yeah.
I've had.
Who cares?
No, I've been setting up. I've been meeting some incredible people this week because I set up vendors for my buyers.
Yeah.
And so I try to meet with lenders, different lenders, title agencies, lawyers, and things like that. And just had a great meeting today. Great Christian. There's so many Christian people out there in these industries, and they do it for the right reason.
Mm. I
mean, I got to just talk for about an hour and a half today, and just hear somebody's heart of why they do what they do. And they're in business, and you talk about kingdom business, what we're talking about. So I work hard to try to find those kind of people to work with, because I know people will be treated well, and the Lord's testimony will be held in high regard there.
Yeah.
And what kind of testimony that is to everybody. And it was awesome too. I kind of like to see how long it takes them to mention anything about their values or faith. And if it doesn't take long, it's a good sign.
Oh, yeah.
For me anyway.
Yeah.
So I've had a good week, but I didn't play golf. So I try not to start my week off with that, because I have golf clubs, but I know nothing good is going to come out of using them.
Well, there's an old saying that a bad day at golf is better than a good day at work.
I don't think that's true.
But this was such a bad round that it wasn't even
cut out early. I got to go to work.
Yeah,
I was like, have anything to do. I'm just going to go
back
work.
to the trudges of work and do that. Cut my finger off or something. I don't know.
Right.
It was horrendous. So,
well, we are happy to have everybody back. If you're listening on the radio, happy Sunday morning.
Yeah.
You should be on your way to church.
Yeah. Stretch
hopefully.
Out and
or
get ready for the day.
Firing up your laptop to watch online.
Yeah.
Because you don't know COVID's over. Come on in. But if you're listening to us on any of our platforms, we're glad you're joining us again. We've had some great conversations again every single week. It just ups the game. So no pressure to our guests this week, but don't let us down.
Yeah, I got to up the game. Sounds good. I'm looking forward to it.
So
but I want to let Derek, you introduce you. You've worked pretty closely with our guest today.
Yeah, so I'll tell you, this was my golf partner this week.
That's right.
And he smoked me out on the course, and he got to watch that horrendous episode of we can't even call it golf.
You know, they did have some of those trees moved for you.
They
That
did.
one hole?
Like-
And it didn't matter, but
Yeah.
they did have it
Yeah,
moved for
like
you.
some corners, I cut the corner only because they moved the tree. You know, It's like, and then I still lost the golf ball. But
Good old
so-
foot wedge. you
Yeah,
know.
exactly. Well, I had to use a couple of those. You know, like foot wedge there.
That's right.
But we're here with the executive middle school pastor.
That's right.
Mr.
Get that title.
That's right, Mr. Michael
The
Thompson.
only executive middle school pastor in Pensacola.
I tell you, I mean, he is the
I don't know if that's
elite middle school pastor going.
That's right.
The number one.
Yeah, because I have to say, I think all middle school pastors should be called executive because it takes special skill.
I agree. Are you calling me special, Dan?
I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying.
That's right.
Well, in a couple different ways, sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm just
I
saying
appreciate
that
that.
I use the same story when I talk about middle school because I've always heard my whole life when my mother's been a high school English teacher for
Mhm.
over 50 years, and she was a middle school teacher for 1 year, her first year. She
Mm.
taught 7th grade, and she said
First and
never
only.
again, never
Yep.
again.
So you realize real quick.
But I always realize, the have you ever read the book Lord of the Flies?
No.
That's a great one.
You know what it's about, though.
Mm-mm.
It's basically a bunch of middle schoolers that get stranded on an island in a shipwreck.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Yes, and it's
I'll have to
it's
preach on that.
terrible. It's and what they go through and put each other through has always reminded. But the author of that book, this was back almost 100 years ago, I guess he wrote this book or more maybe. He wrote it after substitute teaching 7th grade for 1 year.
That'll
he
do
wrote
it.
And he said, "What happens if these kids were on a deserted island? What would
That'll
it
do
look
it.
like?"
Is it a horror book or is it like?
It's a classic.
Oh, okay.
It's an all classic.
No.
So
It was a really good movie.
yeah, they've made a bunch of movies.
Yeah.
A couple different.
Well, now they
versions
got like a female version of that called the Yellow Jackets.
Is that what that's based
Yeah,
off
it's
of?
basically loosely based off of that.
Oh, yeah, that's on
And
Netflix.
I was watching a commercial and I was like, that looks just like Lord of the Flies. Sure enough, I look it up and that's it.
That's
Exactly
what
what
it's
it
based
is. And then
That's funny.
I had to go watch a couple clips of the
That's where they get stranded in the woods after a bus
Yeah.
accident or something.
yeah, and I had to go watch the clip of where the guy pushed a rock off onto Piggy.
I saw that stays with me.
Yeah.
that part of the movie.
It's
yeah.
just,
So what you're
Saddest
telling me
part.
is, if I write a book, it's going to go crazy because I have experience with 7th graders. Is that it?
Most
I
likely.
don't.
Okay. Cool.
I don't think I said that at all. But
Well,
I
well,
So
not
if we're
only
going based on what we're talking about.
not only
earlier.
will
You
the
have a higher
book go
likelihood.
crazy, it's the likelihood that you may also indeed go crazy.
I see.
that's
Yeah.
true.
Okay.
That author did spend the rest of his life in an asylum, but it's fine.
Yeah.
Well, he worked with middle school, right?
See, you're assuming that
That's
you're
what
here.
happens.
Yeah, you're assuming that you're here in a studio with two guys interviewing you,
hmm
but we're not here.
You've just been checked in, so
Yeah.
I see.
to your new home.
I see.
So anyhow, Michael, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good.
Yeah, feeling good after your round of golf yesterday.
You know, I am. I had a couple of really good shots. Some of them felt really good, but then hadn't played in a while, so they were like over the green, you know.
Yeah. Yeah,
But it was fun. It was a good time.
it was a good time. Yeah, and we had we went to lunch afterwards, had some really good conversation, and
I was
yeah.
wondering how you booked him so fast.
Well, that's
we
it.
did have a guest.
we did have a
Kind of
guest.
have to canceled this week.
Yeah, we did. Unfortunately, we had
And Derek came back over text message within like a minute and a half and had somebody new.
well, we had talked about him coming on, and I backed out, and I was like, "This is the time."
Second choice. Here we go.
There you go.
like-
High expectations.
Yep.
No.
I was like, "Hey, look, we need somebody to fill in. Can you?"
Yeah. Hey, everybody else
Everybody else
is
backed out
unavailable.
It's kind of why we've been talking about golf for the last 8.5 minutes.
Yeah,
No, we,
because there's not much else.
That's right.
that's
Yeah.
it. Well, thank you for joining us,
Yeah.
everybody.
And
Well,
so
now,
anyhow.
tell us a little bit about who you are.
Yeah.
Maybe your background.
Yeah.
Our radio listeners aren't going to see you,
Right.
so they don't know
Right.
that you also look like a middle schooler.
Yeah,
No, you
yeah.
look. You have a
Through
very
and
youthful look
Yeah.
that I haven't ever had. I don't.
No, not since I was 8.
Well, they chose me to be a middle school pastor because I look like them, you know.
They
So
just
they're
thought
like,
you were-
oh, well, I mean, he can
he can
relate. Look at
blend
him.
in.
Yeah, he looks like one of them. No, but yeah, so I'm a youth pastor and I work with middle school. So executive is a fancy way of saying I'm the only one. But I like the ring to that. I think I might bring that to staff meeting next
New
week.
business
You guys
cards.
need to call me executive. That'd be
That's
good.
right.
But no, yeah.
that
so
comes
I'm-
with a pay bump too.
yeah, that's right. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll have to push for that.
Probably won't happen, but
That's right.
We can put it out there.
Well, you guys vote real good, okay? And
Absolutely.
Then, and then it might. But no, I serve at Marcus Point Baptist Church, and been there. My family has been there about 8 years, and I've been serving student ministry for 5. So it'll be 6 in June or July, something like that. But yeah, so Marcus Point is a local church, and we've planted some campuses, and so that's actually how I got my start in youth ministry. I went out to the Beulah campus, and I was youth pastor out there from 2019 to 2021, and then got married, and I've been at the Pensacola campus doing middle school for like a little over 2 years and some change, so it'd be 3 years in the summer. So yeah, so I love getting to work with the students, and if you want to learn patience, student ministry is a really great place to go.
Or to learn that you have none is also
Yeah,
a
that's
quick
right.
way to find out.
Yeah.
There's some more background. Is I actually work with Dan's dad. So Dan's dad is our senior adults pastor, Pastor Butch, and then Derek's wife Alicia actually serves in the student ministry with us. Does a great job teaching the 7th grade girls. So yeah, it's cool. So and then my education was at PCA. I graduated from PCA, the high school there, and my dad was military, so we moved around a lot growing up, and got to go to. It was crazy. I actually got to go to private school, public school, and I was homeschooled.
Wow.
So when they figured out the other two didn't
trifecta.
work, yeah, they brought me home. Like, oh, no more detentions if we just get me home.
Yeah.
But no, so. And then I went to PCC. I got a bachelor's in pastoral ministry. So one of the really cool things about our pastor is if you feel called, he'll give you opportunities. And so I was able to step into a role while in college. That was pretty cool. And then I did a master's in biblical languages that I finished last summer.
Nice.
So basically just Greek and Hebrew translation. And I finished my MDiv this summer, so I'm pretty excited about that.
Nice.
Master's of Divinity.
There
So
you
it's basically just a 3-year degree for pastors. So.
That's the big one in divinity school. It's like the
It is, yeah.
90-hour.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
Yep.
the biggie.
It's a lot.
Yeah. Can you read or speak Greek or Hebrew?
I can, yeah. So the funny thing about those languages is Koine Greek and Biblical Hebrew are both dead languages. People don't speak them anymore. Now they do speak Greek and they do speak Hebrew, but it's the modern slant, so it's not the same as the biblical one. But yeah, I can. A lot of the it's kind of like if you learn a language, you may not know every single word in that language,
Sure.
but the common words you do know. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I know some of the more common ones and done some translating and some of the more like argued over passages and stuff to just kind of learn about that. So a little bit here and there. If you just point to a passage, so the Hebrew Bible, the Hebrew Old Testament is a little more complicated because there's a lot more vocab there.
Sure, yeah.
So I'm a little better in the New Testament because there's less words, but yeah.
Yeah.
So it depends on the verse.
Well,
but
you have the Septuagint you could read.
That's right.
You
That's
can
right.
Greek all the way.
That's true.
Yeah, that's
True.
cool. So I tell you, one of the reasons we, we do this podcast, it's a business podcast, and so people probably say, well, one, they got a executive middle school
Thank you,
pastor.
appreciate
Yeah. I just like the ring to it.
Yeah, I do too.
It does
I do
sound
too.
really good on a business podcast. And if they sat down and heard our conversation yesterday and the type of person that we're sitting here talking to, and they're about to learn that, they'll understand why. Though you are a executive middle school pastor.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Global.
Yes.
Let's add that.
Global executive global middle school pastor. You got the principles down that every entrepreneur and every business owner should have. And you implement those in your daily, not only personal life, but also in the way you approach your, pastoral duties, right? And so I think that absolutely people can learn from that. And so we want to kind of delve into that. And
Well, I mean, I think part of what we like to have business owners on is, but we talked about from the very beginning, it's not just about running a business.
Yeah.
It's about the business owner. It's about the person, their mind, their body, their soul.
Yes.
So what makes an entrepreneur, a successful entrepreneur, tick? What makes a successful person? What makes a healthy Christian? You can't
Right.
run a healthy business that is going to exemplify the name of God.
Yeah.
If your spiritual life is a mess, you know what I mean? And if you don't have your personal life in order. So it's not just, we can learn business principles
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah.
But like you said, if you're a healthy believer, you're a healthy person, that mind, body, and spirit all the way throughout, then the type of business you're in can almost be superfluous.
Yeah, absolutely.
To it. So
Yeah.
I'm excited to hear what you've got to say. So take it away. You've got 30 minutes. So
Sweet.
no, we got.
Here's the intro.
We're going on break.
Yeah, that's right. So as a executive middle school pastor, Man, that's going to be awesome.
Global.
Yeah.
Remember global.
We can say that every time.
Every time.
It's eating into our airtime, I think.
Is it? I'll have to watch out for
Shorten
that.
it. That's it.
What would you say from a business or even just an executive middle school pastor standpoint? Now it's just funny. Would you say is the most crucial aspect to being successful? What is your number one aspect?
Yeah, well, I would definitely say walk with God. So, I mean,
Okay.
walk with God, I think, is the key. You know, whether you're a business owner, whether you're a pastor, no matter what you do, your walk with God is the most important thing, for sure. So what that looks like, you know, spiritual disciplines are very important, you know, spending time in the Word and prayer and those things. But so separate from your walk with God, I would say the most important thing is learning how to do the things you don't necessarily feel like doing because they're important to do.
Sure.
Yeah.
You know, like when I'm looking at, and we were talking about this yesterday, the importance of like time management,
Yeah.
you know, and I try to think of like, even with some of the school stuff is, you know, I try to start fast in the semester, finish slow, right? And I try to apply that principle to my week as well. So, you know, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I'm trying to stuff as much as I can in those work hours, right? Don't let work hurt your family.
Yeah.
That's important. But I try to put as many things as I can and start as quickly as I can in the beginning of the week, and then have that, you know, time on the back end. So I would say discipline and time management are huge keys, right? Because, you know, like when you take medicine, it's because you're looking for a certain result, but you don't always feel like taking the medicine, but you know it's important to do.
Right.
And in the business owners that I do talk to, this comes up a decent amount.
Sure.
There's things you do not feel like doing that are very important to do if you want to be successful. And it's also kind of cool at Marcus Point, there are like a lot of business owners around, and our pastor is very business minded too. So, yeah, I would say learn how to do things you don't feel like doing, because they're just, you know, and some of those details, like whether it's in business or in being a pastor, those details are what separate, right?
Sure.
And there's when I think about like it's talked a lot about with money, the compound effect.
Yeah.
I got this from Darren Hardy's book. It's literally called The Compound Effect, but he illustrates what happens when it's like $1 or a cent or something compounds over time in the result, versus, you know, other ways of change. And when you're disciplined, doing things you don't feel like doing in the little areas, over time, that sets you so far apart. Like in his Darren Hardy's book, The Compound Effect, and that's a secular book, it's not Christian, but he talks about 3 different guys who one of them, like he's talking about fitness and he's talking about calories. Like one of them stayed the same. One of them started having this many more desserts, and the other guy started cutting back this many more. And it's like in 10 years, those are 3 very different individuals. Sure. And so, yeah, I would say learn how to do things you don't feel like doing, and the little things, because that's what it compounds, makes a huge difference. So.
Yeah, I think the guy who ate the dessert is going to be much happier.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
That's what I got out of all
until he
that.
goes to the doctor.
Physically, he's a mess.
Yeah,
but
he's a mess,
happy.
but he is definitely.
That's right. That's
I
right.
don't know. I hope my Dr. Kaylin Gray didn't hear that, because she'd be very upset.
Is that your doctor?
My weight loss doctor. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. He's the guy who ate all the snacks is going to definitely be sad. He shouldn't do that.
Spend more money at doctors. Well, let me ask you, because you know, like you said, you work with my dad, so I grew up in the ministry, and you're absolutely right. Discipline. I mean, you see the guys that make it through.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people go into ministry thinking, oh, this is going to be
Yeah.
great. All I'm going to be doing is holding hands and praying and
That's right.
making my own hours and you know, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of hard work.
Mm-hmm.
It's constant. You know, it was not uncommon for Dad to put in 14, 15-hour days. Still does. He's 76, you know.
Right.
Put in those long days
Hard worker.
of ministry. You're there when people need you the most. It's emotionally draining.
Mm-hmm.
It's physically draining. That makes those things you don't want to do much more difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I know there's always that formula, you know, read your Bible and pray every day, and you'll grow. Well, describe a time maybe in your ministry where you're like, I don't think that's enough.
Yeah.
I've hit a wall. I don't think I can. Not
Yeah.
that I don't want to. I don't think I can
Yeah.
anymore. And maybe did God teach you something through that? How did you pull through that?
Yeah.
Or if you haven't really gone through anything that major, maybe how do you think you react in those kind of situations?
Right.
Because they will
Yeah,
come.
I've never had any challenges, so no, definitely been in those situations. I think the biggest one for me was, so it was I was a sophomore at Pensacola Christian College, and I was a youth pastor at the Beulah campus. And I had so much going on at the same time that I burned out. And I was like, okay, I'm done. And I think part of that is just life, right? If you don't learn how to manage yourself, you're going to burn out, period.
Sure.
And I think, if you own the business, you don't have hours. And that's something that's kind of similar on the ministry side of things. If you're in ministry, there's no hours.
Right.
Yeah.
So you have to learn you have to manage yourself so that you can be present and ready to, whether it be teach the word of God or build a relationship with somebody. And you don't know when those are coming up. And you also don't know when the hospital call is coming. So there's so many variables. And from what I understand, it's kind of like that when you own a business too. You don't necessarily, if you're the owner, you're not clocking in, not having to worry about anything. You're having to think, okay, I got other people I got to take
Sure.
care of. And so in that way, I think ministry is a little bit similar. But when I did burn out, because burnout, like it can be, it's a spiritual thing too, right?
Yeah.
And for me, burnout was, I did not manage my time well. And that's kind of what got me started reading a bunch of time management stuff and trying to grow in that area. Because at the end of the day, I noticed that I wasn't what I needed to be for the kids that I was responsible to lead spiritually when I wasn't managing myself well. Sure. And from what I understand, as the boss owning the business, it's the same way.
Yeah.
If you're not lining things out, thinking ahead of time, looking at, and it's a big deal to look at your year as a whole. Okay, when are you speeding up? When are you slowing down throughout
Sure.
the year? Because if you're not careful, you'll speed up and then burn out, right? But the way that I don't know that I handled that situation great, the first time I burned out, but having solid people around you is a big thing,
Yeah.
like when you do burn out, do you have those people that are going to pick you up and be able to encourage you? And if you don't, you got to find them. Right. And so that was a big part of that season, but also just I didn't have a calendar before the burnout. And when I got the calendar, game changer, changed so many things. And there's a lot of guys that I went to school with at college that were studying to be pastors that they didn't really ever learn the calendar, and a lot did, but if they didn't learn the calendar thing,
Sure.
At Marcus Point, pastor will say, you're like a volunteer firefighter. You don't know when the fires are going to pop up because you're not organized. You're not, you don't know what your week looks like.
Sure.
And so you're just running all over the place all the time. Well, that's an exhausting way to live life. And so that's what I was doing. But yeah, whenever I got the calendar and then also put, things that are written down are 60 to 80% more likely to get done. So it's easy to say, okay, I'm going to read my Bible this week and I'm going to show up 15 minutes early to work. Okay. But if you don't have a calendar that's saying how you're going to do that, same with fitness. And that's a big one. A lot of people say, oh, I want to get healthier. It's like, okay. When are you going to go to the gym? Like, what is your plan for
Tomorrow.
Fitness? Yeah. Right. Yeah. And if it's not in the calendar, then it's hard to say that it's that much of a priority. Right.
Yep.
So, but yeah, the calendar was a big thing, and having the right kind of people around me. And I work in a church, so that it can be, but it cannot be, easier to find those kinds of people. And so, yeah, I would say the biggest thing was just organizing my week, knowing. And when I was in my bachelor's degree, I definitely sacrificed my, so I wasn't married at that point. So I am married now. And so I've been married for coming up on 3 years. But when I wasn't married, I also had less things to think about, right? Because you're just thinking for yourself. You don't have to think for more than one person. So
that is very
all
true.
those, all those different factors. And so I'd say, getting organized is the biggest thing. And
Well, you were talking. I think it speaks to us in the church, because I know, being in ministry, people look at you and say he's got to have it all together. He's in a position of authority,
Right.
Yeah, he's fine. He doesn't need encouragement. He's the one that encourages us.
that's right.
He doesn't need somebody to sit down and confess to, or to reconcile with, or to talk through issues. He doesn't have those kind of petty weaknesses. A lot of pastors get isolated because of that. Not necessarily they're trying to isolate themselves.
Right.
Some do. That's usually ego, but I don't get that from you.
Yeah, you met me
But,
yet. Just wait.
But I think it's imperative for church members to realize you're not any different necessarily. You've got a call from God, I believe, or I think you've answered a call that God has given everyone
Right.
to serve Him. You need encouragement. You need somebody to pray for you. You need prayer warriors. You need those close friends that are going to, slap you in the face when you need slapping, and be there to, hold you when you need held. Because there's going to be times you feel really weak. You just feel like I can't tell anybody I'm struggling with this, or I'm thinking about quitting when you burn out, because that's the first thing that goes through your mind when you burn out.
Yeah.
I just want to quit, but I can't tell that to anybody.
Yeah.
Right.
And then you just kind of internalize it. It doesn't get a lot better.
Yeah, I mean, when you run a business, you're
Yeah,
the
same
head
thing.
honcho, right? So who do you turn to?
Right.
I turn to my spouse, but I don't want to burn her out on hearing me every day. So I gotta have Dan to turn to. Well, if he's running a business, he's feeling the same thing. So we got to turn to somebody else.
Sometimes we just hold each other.
We do. It gets a little awkward at a restaurant.
It's weird. We do,
But they kind of get used to it now. They're like, they're just dealing with it. But then, from your standpoint as a pastor, you're hearing all of the stuff that everybody's dealing with on top of the stuff you're dealing with. And some of it could be pretty traumatic, especially in that teenage, life. And that weighs on you. People don't take that into consideration. And putting that into a business perspective from a business owner, okay, I got to worry about making payroll for my guys, make sure that they get the chance to eat this week, and they're not worrying about that.
Right.
They just come to work.
Yeah.
Well, I'm up at 10 o'clock at night worrying to make sure that we're getting this job so that they have work to work tomorrow, Well, when you come to me, or, you as need some prayer, well, I'm also depleted and I need prayer. But people don't take the time to think about that, or most people don't. And, so it can be definitely a challenge. And so from you, back to your perspective of, time management, you have to get yourself on a good time management thing so you can have that time to go and get that stress relief at the gym, or, maybe a moment at the beach, or watching your buddy have a terrible round of golf,
That's right.
or, come on a podcast like this, whatever it may be. And, but we talked about this yesterday as well. It's that time management of the Parkinson's law, right? So you can have it something that just kind of sits and goes all day. I'll just spread it out throughout the day.
Yeah.
You just feel terrible when you do that.
Yeah.
Or you can get it done now, and then you have all day to be able to do whatever you want to do. Matter of fact, you'll probably get a lot more done, and you'll feel a heck of a lot better.
Yeah.
And
That reminds me of if you read, there's a guy named Brian Tracy. I think we've talked about Brian Tracy before. He wrote a book called Eat That Frog.
Yeah.
And it comes from Mark Twain used to say, if you have, and I'll get to what it means in a second, but if you have two frogs you have to eat the uglier one first every day. And what he was talking about in the the funny way of saying it is, if you have your things that you have to do today, do the hardest one first.
Yeah.
Because like what you're saying, Parkinson's law, work always expands the time you get it.
That's
you
right.
give it, right?
Yeah.
And then there's another guy that I listen to. His name's Cal Newport, and he talks a lot about like time management. He's a computer science professor, so he's very analytical in the way he talks about time. And he said he was experimenting with putting a work shutdown time on his calendar every single day for that very reason. Because if you don't say, here's when I'm done, then it's just going to expand all night long. And so will the grad school classes.
Sure.
I mean, you will there's almost no end in sight because there's however many hundreds of hours that go into a semester there. So yeah, that's definitely been, that's a constant struggle. But yeah, knowing that work always expands that time, may make you think twice about what do I start with today?
Yeah.
And then, if I don't stop, my wife and kids aren't going to see me tonight. So how am I going to budget that time, if you're married and have a family? So
I've kind of realized the most important things are things that take the longest. Not only is it a good idea to do it first, I find the day goes faster the longer it goes. For some odd reason, it's like the morning seems a lot longer. Like I can throw out a 3-hour project and it's time for lunch. As soon as it hits 1 o'clock, 30 minutes later, it's 5.
Yeah.
Yep. So trying to put, I've just
That's
discovered that over time. And I think that's just a mindset because we start tearing down after about 1 o'clock.
Yeah. Yeah.
Things start moving. It takes us a lot
I can
longer
agree
to
with
do
that.
that.
Yeah.
And you've mentioned time blocking, which has changed my life.
Yeah.
Because I schedule my quiet time. I schedule, my gym time, my personal time. I schedule time to stop and read and kind of But if I don't schedule that,
You gonna do it.
it's done.
Yep.
I don't even realize it. It's not, and it's not in the top of my mind. I think for a schedule for me is more important because my brain goes all over the place all the time, and I kind of ping pong. If I don't have something that's anchoring me to reality of what needs to be done, you can have a busy day, and sit there and be like, I didn't do anything.
I think also like what separates people that are really, really good at what they do and people that aren't. It's not like that. Obviously, we've all heard you only have so many hours in the day, so it's not hours. It's prioritizing.
Yep.
Right.
And when you have a written out calendar, you can easily see here's what needs to be the priority. And so one of the things that I think about, like with ministry, is I always want people to be the priority, period, every time.
Sure.
So I try to be, in my mind, now I'm not always successful with this, but in my mind, I try to be so laser focused on getting tasks done when people aren't an opportunity to be ministering to, so that when that opportunity does come up in the afternoon, I can always be there, right? Now, I do not execute. This is something I'm working on, right?
So you only do ministry in the afternoon?
That's
Is
correct,
that what we're hearing?
Okay. One day a week, preferably.
Jesus can
Sunday.
wait.
Yeah.
If you have a problem with Tuesdays between 1 and 4, please see Pastor Mike.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Well, I think that's funny that you said, or not funny, but interesting how you said the day speeds up. Because what I notice is that my phone buzzes way more in the afternoon than it does the morning. And so like getting that opportunity to really sit down and get a project done before the world really kind of gets going and gets trying to reach you. That's prime time. And every time that you get distracted, you lose 17 minutes. So that's something that I've learned is whenever
restarted.
you don't take into consideration how much time it takes you to get back to what you were doing, especially if you're doing knowledge work. If you're reading or writing, every time your phone goes off and you stop, between the time it takes to stop and start and the in-between time, it's like 17 minutes total. So I try to, in my mind, think about that, and have those times where it's like, okay, I'm focused on this, put the phone away, because where our society is, the phone can grab you at any moment, right? So something else, this is just a little thing, is like, don't have notifications on your phone for the stuff that doesn't matter. Like a lot of people, I look at their phone and it's like red, and it's like, you become desensitized to important things because you can't tell, the whole Eisenhower's matrix between urgent, important, not. Like all these things on your phone are grabbing you, and you're not able to distinguish what is the priority, right? And so then, you are a product of what your day wanted. You're not getting a hold of your day is getting a hold of you, and you're just a kind of a bystander if you're not prioritizing. So that really resonated with me.
Well, the opposite side of the Parkinson's law is that, not only does time expand, it also contracts into whatever time you allow it, right? Yeah. So if you put it on your calendar and you say, okay, I've only given this project an hour to get done, the mind allows it gives you the chance to go and just get it done in that hour. Mm-hmm. When you're like, well, man, this used to take me 2 or 3 or 4 hours. Mm-hmm. Well, why is that? Because I've only given it an hour to be done. That's why people wait until the last minute and somehow make it happen.
Yeah.
Well, okay, you got a 60-minute football game, and then they have the 2-minute drill. Well, why is that? Because it works. Mm-hmm. It works in life the same way. All you have to do is prioritize it. That's where the time blocking kind of comes from. Just make it work.
Yeah.
And then it frees up your entire afternoon or your entire day, or that's how you can get a 3-day weekend or whatever. I
think I love finding new terms when people actually kind of codify, however you pronounce it, things like those kind of principles, because everybody knows it. It's when someone says something profound, it's profound because everybody goes, yeah, you're right. Because we kind of knew that already. Because this, I mean, like in running people, and you probably have a lot of volunteers, which is a whole different ballpark as opposed to employees.
Yeah. Can't fire them.
Right. Well,
the same way. Yeah.
You can't give an open-ended assignment to an employee.
Right.
You can't say, I need this done. When? Just get it done.
Yep.
It'll never get done.
That's right.
It'll never get done. And we know this. Mm-hmm. But it helps us when we codify these kind of things and give them names like, what is it, Parkinson's Sonoma? What is it?
Yeah, Parkinson's Law.
It sounds like a fashion brand.
I got another name for you. Ready? The other one is Pareto's principle.
Yeah, Pareto's.
You know that one?
Mm-hmm.
I think it goes 20. You said yesterday 10 and 90. I don't know that the exact number matters.
80-20.
But yeah, 80-20 is the one I'm familiar with, that 80% of the value that you bring when it comes to work is through 20% of the tasks.
Yeah.
So I was actually thinking about that the other day as a youth pastor, and I'm like, okay, what is that 20%? And in my mind, it's like, okay, the time when I'm at church discipling and being prepared to be at church discipling, you know,
Sure.
it's like, and the events fall into that and all these different things. But what I notice is like, you can, and even in your work, you can spend all your time. It's like, oh, I work, 70 hours this week. It's like, okay, but what did you do? Because like just working a lot isn't necessarily that amazing. It's okay, how did you prioritize that time that you did work? Because, if you're not getting the most important things done, you're just spinning your wheels, right?
Sure.
So yeah, that 80-20 is really resonates with me, because like in any job, right? And you have to make that decision. What is that 20%? And spend all your time doing those most important things. And then what's really interesting is, when you're focused on that 20%, then it's like here's another rule. There's never enough time to get everything done in work, but there's always enough time to get the most important things done.
That's right.
And so when you start working on the most important things, that 20%, at the end of your day, you're always or your week, you're always going to have things that you don't get to. So you want the things that you don't get to be the less important things, not the most important ones,
Sure.
So, and it's so funny, like those rules like make such a big difference.
Yeah.
And it's not just a ministry thing, it's everything in life thing. And with the working, expanding your time, I've noticed that with reading a lot. If you ever sat down and read something before and then you went back up and reread and reading's important because, not even just in pastoring, any expert in the field spends 90 minutes every day studying the field. That's just the stats, right? So, putting down time to say, okay, here's when I'm done with this task, man, it makes a huge difference.
Sure.
Yeah, it makes you switch. And so that's a huge deal.
Yeah, and that Pertito principle, I mean, it's true in the micro in our time and our tasks. It's also true in the macro too, as far as business, because 80% of the successful business done in your business is going to be done by 20% of the people.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's just how it's always going to work. It's going to be those kind of high performance. It's kind of like the golden ratio of everything.
Yeah.
Almost is that 80-20 rule.
Church the same way.
Yeah, and Derek, you wrote a devotional, and if you haven't checked out we have devotionals on our website, theartpodcast.com. Derek we'll post one every week, but you did the 80-20 principle, and we just posted the Block It, which was your Parkinson's melanoma. What is it?
Yeah, we can call it that. Sure.
I'm not even sure
disease.
if it's hyphenated or if it's just
Parkinson's. Not like as in you got the...
Is it the same guy?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't know.
No.
If it was, that guy was busy.
He was very busy.
He got a lot done.
He did.
He got his own principle and his own disease. I mean,
He was shaking while he was getting
retire, man.
Yeah.
That's why he's working.
Yeah.
Oh man, but well, that's what I wanted to ask you too, because I've, my experience growing up in ministry, volunteers.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't. This does go out over the air, so I have to be anything too specific.
Right.
Yeah, I've got a lady that works for me that's just no.
Who was the one you were talking about yesterday?
Yeah,
Right.
kind of talk about that dynamic, because there's a lot of,
Yeah.
because I realize with volunteers, you can't give just a bunch of orders because they work for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have to convince them. You got to win them to your side and convince them to do what needs to be done. That's challenging,
Mm-hmm.
right? What have you found? Maybe that we can find glean some principles. You don't have to be specific about.
Sure.
But and operating people in, because the concept here is you've got to win people. We have to win people too with employees. It's the same thing. I mean, we can tell them to do something. That's not a great way to lead. It's a good way to manage, not always a great way to lead.
Mm-hmm.
What have you kind of found in your principle and your experience over time with volunteers?
Well, one thing that I have seen is there are lots of ways to do this. Mm-hmm. Some people they'll lead by various ways, but by far the most, in my experience, from what I've seen and at times been a part of, is leading by inspiring people. It's kind of common. I know some of the more popular guys have popularized this question, but answering the why behind what you do. So the funny thing about working with volunteers in church is, in business, when you're trying to hire somebody, they may, depending on the job, a lot of times maybe it might be a little bit easier to lead that person because they don't have your skill set. Well, the funny thing in church ministry is sometimes someone will be serving with you that has a much stronger skill set than you do in some areas. So learn how to lead somebody like that is like, humility is huge, right?
Sure.
And I think even as the leader of a business, being humble enough to acknowledge where, you messed up and own it and move forward, man, as someone who works somewhere, that's such great leadership, right? But I think the biggest thing is leading by inspiration. And I try to, always be thinking, okay, if I was a volunteer, what would I want? I would not want to show up and people not have it together and not be efficient with my time, because my time is the most valuable asset that I have, not my money, because we were talking about this yesterday. You can always get your money back. But if I show up and, I'm giving my time to invest and to serve, I want my time to be used well. And when it's not, it's going to drive me up a wall. Right? So I think that's one thing. I think, we have different volunteer meetings and stuff like that. And I try to be very like, hey, here's what you need to know. Here's how we're doing this. Over communication is big, and what's funny is people don't listen when you communicate. I don't know how many times I've put information.
I just said that.
Like, no, you mean you're asking me this right now, and I've posted this 9 times,
2 lines down,
handed it
where
out,
you stop reading
6 times in person, and told you about it because you came to me last time I didn't. So
he's not naming anyone specific.
Yeah. I won't drop any names. But yeah, I think leading by inspiration is big. Over communication is very important. And, I'm younger than almost all of the leaders that I get to serve with. And so that can be challenging, because it's like, okay, I'm not in here claiming to know it all. I promise you that. But I do know here's where we need to go as a group. And so, like, how are we going to do this as a team? And, leading with those kind of mindsets, I think that's really big. And with volunteers, so I try to invest in all my volunteers. But one thing that I've learned is how I invest in each one is different. Right? I'm not going to lunch with one of my female volunteers. I'm just not going to do it, period. So I try to think, okay, who are the people that I'm responsible for? And in my mind, I'm thinking, how can I add so much value to their life as they're a volunteer that they are watching themselves grow in this role, therefore they want to do this forever, And I think the same way in a business, right? Because if somebody works for you and they just get a paycheck, okay, they're going to leave for the better paycheck. But if somebody works for you and they get value and they watch themselves grow and develop as you're leading them, I mean, how long is that person going to work for you, right? They're getting so much more out of you leading them. So to the best of my ability, I try to just think, what would I want as a leader, and in what ways can I encourage them to grow and evaluate so that they can be the best that they can be, and they get more out of this than just showing up and just serving students. Like, they grow as a person as a result of being part of this group. And so I think thinking about some of those things, it's hard because it's definitely more work, and definitely takes more mind energy. But the result when people show up and do commit to serving is it's very different. And the caliber of person in the church world, it's important to have a certain caliber of people like serving, especially with kids, because if somebody shows up and they see, oh, this is a student ministry, and it's like, oh, wow, these people are super irresponsible, they're not going to be very trusting. So it's so important that we have a certain kind of people serving in there, and the only way to get those kind of people is to lead a specific way. So it's definitely catch-22, because you think, oh yeah, it's just middle school, but there's actually a lot more to it. Believe it or not, to the executive global middle school pastor.
And with volunteers or anybody, as a father of a teenager and soon to be some other teenagers, they need that the stability, right? They need to have people who are consistent. And so if you're not leading your volunteers very well, they're not sticking around. And so these kids are like trying to build a relationship, because you can't do it all. Right. So you have to have these volunteers. And they're not going to stick around. Like you said, you're robbing their time. You're like, well, you know what? I'll just move on to somewhere else. And people are bad about that for all kinds of particular reasons. Right. It doesn't have to be anything big. Michael wore the wrong shoes today. Well,
that's right.
That's okay. But those kids are kind of finicky. They're in that weird stage. You were just there
last year.
Yeah. I'm sorry.
He said all of his volunteers are older, because he's not old enough to have a middle school age kid yet, which makes kind of sense.
Yeah.
You're at a different phase in life. I mean, first of all, I've got kids under 3, 2 children under 3, but people I went to high school with are sending me pictures of their kids graduating from college, which is hurtful.
I mean, listen,
but it's
we're like in an opposite
phase.
Big perspective here.
We're here to hold you,
So I'm 4 years older than you. Okay. Absolutely, am old enough to be Michael's dad. you would have gotten started a little bit younger. We both could be,
I'm your uncle.
That's right.
So
Crazy uncle or
Probably.
yeah. So yeah, I mean that's why you beat me in golf.
That's right.
it's the youth.
Can't be old man.
Yeah. I think also with when it comes to like volunteers, it's I think the same stuff works leading volunteers and leading paid people because it's just leading people.
Yeah,
that's
sure.
what works.
Yeah, it's all
leading,
people.
Yeah, leading by inspiring others, role modeling the way.
Sure.
Not to asking people to do something that you don't do already. Those principles. But then even with like specifically as a middle school pastor, they like you said they're going through so much change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And many of them don't have a person in their lives who is consistent.
Yeah.
And so I tell leaders all the time, man, when we show up and we are, because it's tricky because they're in such a volatile state. Some of them may start doing well spiritually one year, and then by the end of the year, they're not as good as they were.
Right.
So what, did you fail? No. We not necessarily. Maybe you did. Maybe you just failed. But we win when we love the kids and we invest in them spiritually consistently, throughout that time because they don't have that many people necessarily consistent.
Yeah.
And same in the work world.
I'd like to have you talk a little bit more of that on the backside of the show and our premium content because we're running out of time here. But I want to thank you for coming on our radio show today. We're going to talk for a little while longer. So if you want to catch that at thearcpodcast.com and catch the rest of our conversation. Thank you, Michael Thompson, for being with us today. Well, I wanted to ask you, because we were touching in on leadership of people, and we were talking a bit in between segments here. I wish we just would keep recording sometimes, because there's some good stuff. Talk a little bit. You were talking about walking into, and I think we've all been in this situation, especially when, I don't know how old you are. We don't have to say. You're in your 20s.
Yes.
Walking into and given a position of leadership like you're in.
Mm-hmm.
You find yourself, and you're kind of talking a little bit about it in the break. You find yourself going, well, what am I doing here? Maybe I know I felt that way. Like, well, what am I doing here?
Mm-hmm.
I know there's people out here that have a lot more experience than me, but somebody saw something in you, or God led them to put you in a position of leadership, and that's a big position of trust. Because it's hard to figure out. I don't even know how I fail yet. Because
right.
You're going to start discovering all those different kinds of things, and Derek and I have a couple of years under our belt and a lot of failure under our belt in that time, which instructs a lot. Go through, and as you're working with people that have more experience, what have you gleaned off of them? You talked a little bit about the 30-year people.
Yeah.
And I know on the staff at your church, I think it ranges from 5 years to 55 years, So you've got hundreds of years of experience sitting there.
Mm-hmm.
What have you kind of gleaned as far as different leadership styles, how they lead people? What's the biggest lesson that maybe you've learned from somebody else when it comes to leading?
Yeah. I think diligence and
you don't have to mention my dad. That wasn't a softball question.
That's right. That's right. Pastor Bush. No, I was kidding. I think diligence is of the utmost importance, right? Diligence in work. And, something that is kind of common today, and I'm sure y'all have talked about this on podcasts at some point, but sometimes younger people don't really want to put in the time and put in the work, but they want the benefit. And I was talking to a guy the other day at the gym. He works for Circle K, and he's in a leadership position there. But he was telling me about the other day he's listened to a podcast, and they said that don't get frustrated when you didn't get an opportunity that you didn't work for, Right. And so I think,
so true.
Yeah. Everybody wants like this just handed to them, but it's like, okay, at the end of the day, and the Bible talks about this. Diligence is so important, and when it comes to just being around people that have done it for a really long time, I think. This is just a big deal. Don't walk in any room ever thinking that you know it all. Yeah. I don't care how much you know. When you think you know it all, how much more can you
Trust
learn?
me, it doesn't go well.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's something I've had the opportunity to be taught, and I'm super thankful for. But do your best. There's just so much to that. Like, do your best. Be on time. Go the extra mile. When you do those things consistently over a long period of time, no matter who it is, that's respectable. Like if you're 15 and you've been doing that for 5 years. That's
Sure.
respectable. Now, a 15-year-old, obviously, they're still a kid. But so I think that one thing I've learned the most in that room with so many people that have so much experience is that, just do your best and don't make excuses, you know, and be consistent. And when you do those things, it speaks volumes. And a lot of times the people that talk the most like about what they do, I don't want to, we don't have to go too much there, but if you do a good job, you don't have to tell everybody. They see it.
Yeah.
You can just be really diligent and they see it. And it's funny because they'll come talk to you.
Well, it goes hand in hand with your Christian walk, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to tell people from the mountaintops that you're a Christian. It should just kind of be evident.
Yeah.
Well, I found if I don't do that, no one gives me compliments. I'm just.
You're a good compliment fisher. I'm just so bad at my work, throwing that line out there, hoping
they don't even do anything.
Yeah,
That's weird.
Well, and even that reminds me of, I think it's 1 Peter 3:15, but it talks about how always be ready to give an answer for the hope that is in you.
Mm-hmm.
And then it says, but do so with gentleness. But I taught on this a little while ago. The assumption there is that people are asking you about the hope that's in you, and to your point, that only happens when you live that out genuinely.
Yeah, sure.
You know?
Yeah.
And but they will ask, and if you're a Christian living for the Lord, that's a great opportunity to witness. But if you don't live that way,
Yeah.
Or you say you're a Christian, but you're not a hard worker, like, okay, then you're violating another principle in Scripture. Whatever the right hand finds to do it to the best of your ability. Like, you're not doing that. You
Sure.
know?
Yeah.
So
Well, that's actually a perfect segue because I wanted to ask you because obviously we're speaking predominantly to entrepreneurs, but I think there's so many great, I hate to say principles because it seems trite, but the type of work that someone does in the ministry, I think there's so many great things that you can take out of that and apply in a business situation as an entrepreneur. I say that because I know a lot of people that have made that transition from full-time ministry into business, and they didn't struggle a lot if they did ministry well. I mean, if you do anything poorly, it's going to be hard to transition into something and do it well.
right.
But what do you see? I mean, speak to our entrepreneurs here. What are some things that you see, or maybe you can just kind of describe? I mean, we've talked about some of your disciplines. Think big picture, some of those kind of principles that can have a right application into business that can help not someone just be successful at business, but be successful at running a kingdom business that can have an impact on people's lives. Some things that our entrepreneurs can have at the forefront of their minds as they run their business.
I think delayed gratification is a big one, and I think in general in our dopamine addicted society, what I mean when I say that is with our electronics, and there's so many things that we do that it gives us instant gratification. We're made happy right now with whether it's a TV show or things you eat, whatever. I think it's so important to learn how to look at something with the delayed gratification mindset, in that I may not see results today or tomorrow or in a week, but I am going to do this business or this thing so consistently, and I'm not going to worry about if I see results today. I'm going to just be super consistent at this and work hard now. And I know that one day, obviously, I'll be rewarded for the value that I provide.
Sure.
But not getting discouraged, quitting, giving up, or whatever in the short term because you're looking at the long haul. And I think that's so true in ministry too. I mean, I know we're talking to entrepreneurs, but anytime you get super focused on the short term, you can take shortcuts.
Oh yeah.
And there's just no shortcut. Like if you want a certain job, or if you want to be a certain kind of a person, there's no shortcuts there.
No.
And even if there were shortcuts, you didn't develop into the kind of person along the way that could lead that business, right? Like even if you could in 1 year of hard work be at that job or that position you wanted, dude, some of these things take more than a year.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, some of these things take 20 years or 10 years or 15. So I think there's no shame in this may not happen next year or the year after, but I'm going to be consistent in the meantime and not worry about when the results happen, because I'm so focused on consistently providing this value in the meantime.
Sure.
And as far as time frame. Obviously, and I'm not saying don't have written down when you want to monetize this thing. I'm not saying that.
Sure.
Like, you need to write down the goals so that you can build back from that goal and have a time frame.
Sure.
But just the big perspective of I'm going to be very, very consistent, and I'm not going to worry about the time frame on when this comes.
Yeah.
Well, that's one
yeah.
one of the things we talked about when starting this podcast, is that, people oftentimes look at other podcasts or other guys on YouTube and, all these different things and say, okay, the 5 steps or 7 steps or 10 steps to becoming a millionaire or a billionaire or super successful.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all legitimate. You have a legitimate argument. I'm not saying that you're wrong.
Right.
But you're discounting all the steps it took to get to that,
Mhm.
right? And so everybody who watches those videos and assumes that if I just do those things, I'm going to be successful next week and my bank account's going to be full next month.
Sure.
Sure, there's going to be a one-off who might hit something just right and it's going to work. But there's a reason why we call them a Fortune 500 company, because there's only 500 of them, but there's 5 million other companies out here
Yep.
who are not a part of that. So it takes a lot of steps to get to becoming where those 5 steps are super easy.
Well, I think it's because, and naturally we do this, and we do it for good reasons. We glorify the exceptions.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
And it really is. And we try to pattern our lives after them. And everybody, 98% of the people get discouraged and never accomplish
Yep.
anything towards. And if you don't think that exists in ministry, you got another thing coming.
Oh,
yeah.
It really is a lot of that. And I'm very weary, and I still set goals. But I've read a few things this year that have really challenged the way I look at goals. It's not just about a goal. It's about a process, especially in business. Master a process, and then your goals are going to happen.
Yeah.
It's good to have goals, but if I'm just reaching for a goal and I've got no way to get there, that's got another thing. It's kind of like how many people have joined the military because they saw an incredible recruitment video. You know what I'm saying? Like jets just flying and bombs exploding and people flipping and all this kind of stuff. And that is not a majority of your career.
Right.
That might be 0.01% of your career a lot of times. They don't show you, you're going to be on a ship for 12 months stuck in a bunk doing the exact same thing every single day.
Yep.
Over and over. And you're not going to see daylight for a month at a time.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a necessary part of being able to do all that 0.1%. It's the same thing in our business, same thing in ministry. Most of ministry and most of business is just consistent. I don't want to say drudgery, but it's consistent, same process over and over and over again. And it goes back to those disciplines. And I want you to kind of speak, what are some disciplines, spiritual disciplines, that entrepreneurs can implement in their life? Because we get busy, but down to the core of being busy and not getting stuff done is really what we're unwilling to do.
Yeah.
Like we use busy as an excuse.
Mm.
And I think we had
that.
a speaker talk about it. There's a great book out. I don't know if I can say it on the radio, but it's a Christian author, but it's called Stop Using the B Word.
Okay.
It's supposed to be provocative, but it's busy.
Busy, right.
He said you're just unwilling to do it.
Right.
But it's about being intentional
Right.
about what you do. What are speak about spiritual disciplines that can make you, as a kingdom entrepreneur or someone in ministry, what are disciplines they need to look at in their life that are real practical, and speak simply and as specifically as possible without being overly unrealistic, but
Right.
speak about some things that we can put down. If an entrepreneur is sitting here right now and says, I struggle with spiritual discipline, help me out.
Yeah.
Give me some things.
Let's do it this way. Let's go a day and a discipline by the week and a discipline by the month. Let's try that. So a discipline by the day, obviously time in God's word. You want to find the best business principles in the world, go to the book that has no issues with it and is perfect, and go to Proverbs.
Yeah.
Proverbs is a book written from an older man's perspective to a younger man, or to someone who's not mature yet, and teaches them how to be mature and how to have skill in living this life. And you'll see things in Proverbs like a false balance is an abomination to the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
And the first time I preached on that, I thought it was going to be a time management verse, but it's not. It's a verse about when you try to take advantage of someone else, because a balance was a scale. So when you were in the marketplace and you were going to sell a product, you should not try to win one over on somebody. You want to talk about how to be a good business owner, learning how to be fair in what you're asking.
Sure.
Yeah.
Providing win-win situations, you know, in transactional things. So my point is, Proverbs is it's completely true, and so spending time in God's Word each day is super important. And you know, those principles, anything you can find in a secular book that works, that truth you're going to find in the Bible. And sometimes we rewrite these secular books and we have a really good cover and a fancy clickbait title, but we're just saying something that was written by God 2,000 years ago, you know?
Sure.
So I think that's important to remember. So on the daily, I would say is very important, spending time in God's Word spiritually, and then, you know, practically. You know, we were talking yesterday about the difference between working on your business and working in your business, you know. And so if you're an entrepreneur, spending time thinking not just, okay, what do I have to do this week for what I'm already committed to, but like, what are the things that I can do that are going to put me in a different opportunity in the future? You know, the easiest, I feel like the most basic one is just education, you know, but that doesn't mean a degree, but having that time blocked off that where you're going to be learning and growing and developing each day, super important. So I'd say by the day, spiritually, spend time in God's Word. By the week, having that group of believers that you're around, very, very, very important. And people that you have things in common with, because it's important, even when you're setting goals, those goals have to align with your values. Because if you set a goal that doesn't align with your values, say, I want to be CEO of Apple, okay? Just throw that out there, okay? That's a grand goal. That sounds awesome. But that may violate you being a family dad in your home, you know? So understanding how to set goals that also align with your values, super important. Where do you learn that? I believe in God's house every single week, you know? And, you know, where you choose to go to church, that's not as important as being in church, being around those believers who are like-minded. And something that's cool at the church I get to serve at is there are people in the church who have great ideas and have done so much when it comes to business, and I'm not there for that. I'm there to serve the Lord, but those people help sharpen me as I'm there. And so that's and they have the same values, and that's what I'm getting at, is being involved in a place where you're going to grow spiritually, you know, weekly, so that, you know, and the thing is with church, everyone's using their gifts differently, you know, and so, you know, you'll walk out of church encouraged, and so all that different stuff, super important on the week. Okay, by the month, I would say I've been doing this for about a year now, but I have these month evaluations, and I think, I know none of this stuff is new. A lot of these productivity hacks they're old. You know, once David Allen wrote Getting Things Done and Stephen Covey wrote 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, everybody's just, you know, and even them, it's before those guys. But by the month, I evaluate. I think Zig Ziglar called it the Wheel of Life. Is that accurate?
Like
Are you
wheel,
familiar? Yeah. So I kind of do like a modified life wheel. I have this journal that once a month, at the end of the month, I go in there and I rate, okay, how's my marriage doing this month? How is my spiritual time doing? How is my, you know, I break it down into my finances, you know, what's my goal for the next little while, and am I executing that? And then how is my education, whatever. But that's a big thing to do spiritually too, because then in your life, you're stepping out of just the day-to-day, having to handle the next thing that's grabbing your attention to, okay, from a 30,000 foot view, am I going where I think God needs me to go or wants me to go? He doesn't need us, but he wants us. Am I going where God wants me to go as this entrepreneur in this business, you know? And are God's values reflected in my business? You know, we were talking a little bit before about even taking care of the people that work for you. That's such a huge deal, you know? And in business, some people will take advantage of other people to make the dollar, you know? And but that contradicts principles that we see in God's Word. So as far as spiritual practices, I think that, you know, when it comes to the month, reflecting on how are you doing spiritually, because don't think for a second your spiritual health doesn't affect your entrepreneur life. It 100% does. Oh, yeah. And also, what's the point in making all the money if you're not going to be a giving person that blesses other people? Because then it's just it can be if it's just about money. I think that that's a very shallow way to even just live life. You know? Yeah. And something else is, if it is just about money, that purpose goes away pretty quick when you get, you know, down in the dumps and discouraged. And so you have to have a bigger why than that. And, you know, I believe serving the God of the universe and honoring him with your business is that why.
Yeah, and I think going into business, just looking for, you know, money, money obviously is, key to business, right? You got to have money in order to operate. You got to have money in order to pay your employees. You got to have money in order to live. That it kind of makes the world go round to some degree. But if that's your first priority, you might as well just go work for somebody else.
Yeah.
Yep.
You start a business, it should be for a whole nother reason. We like to think of that as providing value. Then the money comes pouring in. And sometimes in order to provide value, you have to do, as you just elaborately displayed, which is you have to do the things that don't necessarily bring money in up front, but they do exponentially in the long run. Doing those little things, learning something new, treating people right, changing habits, and looking back at the grand scheme of everything and taking a daily checklist and going over it. I mean, those things don't bring in money right now, but they change who you are and how you act, and then that changes everything, whether it's in a business or in your ministry. In the ministry, it might not change your finances, from a business perspective like that, but it will change how much the church will probably pay you because you've become an executive.
There it is again.
But seriously, I mean, that's they'll look at that because they're like, okay, now he's become exceptional,
Right.
and we can't lose him because if you start to go, I'm Pastor, I'm moving on to another church. They're like, well, what can we pay you to stay?
Right.
Because you have shown the kind of qualities that we need to keep here.
Right.
And it's all from doing those small things.
Right.
It's the small things. We've talked about that before. The small things matter more than the big things. The big things just get the credit.
And I think a big difference in a kingdom business or a kingdom mindset as an entrepreneur. We talk about, we didn't want to be the 10 ways to, have $100 million business. Because the truth is most people aren't going to have a $100 million business.
Nope.
But everybody wants one. And everybody's going to be in constant disappointment all the time. Mm-hmm. But I think having a kingdom business focuses us that says, maybe I can do a business that does $300,000 a year, or $400,000 a year, or $500,000 a year, and that's what God wants me to do.
Yeah.
And I'm going to designate this so I can do in the ministry what God has called me to do, and I can take care of my family. We can do some of the fun things if we want to do fun things, but there's a purpose to my business. Right? Concentrate on running a very successful $50,000 a year business, and then concentrate on running a very successful $100,000 a year business. I think we have to kind of mitigate as believers, because the more money gets involved, the more the devil can walk in.
Oh.
Do you know what I'm saying? And suddenly it is all about the money. And I used to always question that. People go, well, if you're just working for the money, I don't know. I used to always go, well, let me ask you, if you didn't need money to live, would you still work? That's a question I think we should answer.
Boy, I absolutely
would. You still work?
Yeah.
Right? I don't know how most people would answer that.
That's true, though.
Most people would go,
right.
No.
Well,
Right?
I wouldn't work in the gutter business.
No,
I would still work.
But, I think it puts it in proper perspective of we work for a reason.
Yeah.
Because we were called. And I think because, you've got more degrees than I do, but I got a couple that you do. Or we talk about the general call and the special call, the specific call. There's a general call that God gives all of us to go into all the world, preach the gospel. That's on every believer.
Yep.
And I think there's a lot of people in ministry who are in full-time ministry under a general call.
Yeah.
I think special calls are pretty rare, to be quite honest with you, because if you look every time in the scripture that God specially called an individual to a purpose, it was not a fun life. You know what I mean? Every prophet didn't retire to the countryside. Do you know what I mean? From Jonah to Isaiah to Daniel, it wasn't a fun life. I think God calls a special call for a special mission a lot of times. But every single one of us should answer the call, the general call. And God's given everybody, different abilities, different proclivities. He's guided us. He's allowed us to lead a life full of mistakes and sin and things that he has brought us through and taught us for a moment just like this. And I think when we approach a business like this, we have an opportunity to further his kingdom. And that may mean I'm never going to run a $100 million business.
Yeah.
But I'm going to run a business.
Yeah.
Right? And what does that mean for the kingdom? And what does that mean for my family? And what does that mean for my church? And I think that changes our goals. It changes our process. It may mean I'm going to sacrifice making a lot more money out of this because I'm going to do what God's called me to do.
Yeah.
And this. I won't call her name out, but there's a lady that works in mortgage lending who I was speaking with today, who's a Christian, actually a member of our church, who says, I tell people not to get mortgages sometimes, or I send them somewhere else. And I sacrifice because she said, I can't make money off of that. I can't do it because it's not what's right for them.
Yeah.
It's not what's best for them. And she said, you know why I can't do that? Because if I did that, it's not just my name and my reputation that I've muddied up.
That's right.
It's the God I serve.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Think about the amount of, and she runs a very successful business, and God has blessed her as a result of it. Think about if we have more people in this world going, I represent God in this business. My logo doesn't matter. My business structure doesn't matter. I'm honoring God in this business. I'm not expecting God to honor it because I told him that. Hey,
Right.
make me a millionaire because I told you I'd give 10%. But that we're going to do something great. I mean, think about if we had 100 Christian entrepreneurs who sat down around the table every month and said, this is how we're going to impact the kingdom this month or this year with our businesses.
Yeah.
Think how our communities might be different. Think about how our world think how missions might be different. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think about that. I think about that a lot. I mean, there's over 1 billion people that never even heard the name of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm worried about selling houses.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It makes it feel a little trite. But what God can do through me selling and buying and all these different, what God can do through a gutter business, it may not have been your dream when you were 11 years old dreaming of being an astronaut, but what God has done through that business, what God is doing through your middle school ministry, I mean, that is a critical time.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't imagine what middle schoolers are going through these days.
So they, statistically, now they hit puberty 2 years before what they used to.
Yeah.
So the old high school is now middle school. So, and the difference is the brain isn't developed to what it was when you experienced these things the first time in high school. It's a younger brain experiencing the same things, and the way that technology puts information out there, our middle schoolers are exposed to more information now than they ever have been.
Yes.
And that's good and bad, because information is also the same way somebody can be in one job being educated and get more and more education and not sacrifice the job experience. That's one pro of education. But the downside of technology, because how it affects what you can know, but the downside is information doesn't tell you if it's right or not.
Right.
It's just there. It's just information, So like what, the young people are exposed to now is definitely a game changer and affects how they change. And something else I was thinking about when we were talking earlier about business is something that I noticed, and this is not tried and true. I haven't, it just came to my head, and I may be wrong, but it seems that the most effective businesses are always focused on people. And I know you have like the customer, right? Yeah. But it's like no matter what you do, it always moves down to, like, if you're selling Wi-Fi, at the end of the day, like, you're trying to like help somebody, enjoy their leisure time more. Or, even today, Wi-Fi is more of a work commodity, or even putting up gutter. Like, I'm serving the person. And I feel like something that I have seen in some businesses is, when it's very transactional, nobody really wants that.
No. I mean, so from my perspective, exactly 100%, we try to do it like that, right? So if I go out to an estimate and I walk around a house with a customer, I'll say, the first thing I ask them is, how can I help you? I know I'm here for a gutter, but where do you want it? In the front and back is typically where they're wanting it, or all the way around. And they'll say, well, I don't really know. Where do I need it? Okay, well, let's walk around and look. And I say, there's things I look for to determine whether you need it everywhere or not.
So you need 3 rows of it all the way around. That's
right. Yeah. and in copper.
Yeah, that's right.
Half round.
Half round. With multiple brackets. Right. And so I will walk with them and say, okay, look, you can bypass this side of the house because you got this kind of slope and the water's probably getting out, and looking at all these different factors, blah blah blah. And I'll say, okay, I would for sure do this section, and you can bypass that one and whatnot. But I'll send you an estimate for the whole house, and I'll send it for just these areas here that are of greatest concern. And 9 times out of 10, they'll say, just go ahead and they'll come back and say, let's do the whole house.
Yeah.
You know, and so I sold them by not selling them
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
everything.
Exactly.
Or especially with like a leaf guard system. I'm like, okay, look, you can either get the leaf guard or you can hire us to come out and just clean out your system every so often. And here's how many years if you're going to be here for blah, blah, blah. Here's your break-even analysis. And, you know, you can do it now. Or if you're going to be here for these many years. And 9 times out of 10, they'll say, well, we'll just go ahead and get that package too.
Mm-hmm.
I don't pressure them.
Yeah.
It's always optional. But because I'm thinking about their budget for them, and because I understand it's going to be a lot of cost up front,
Yeah.
because we don't do payment, you know, like there's a lot of companies who do like we'll do a payment plan, but we don't charge any interest. There's a lot of companies who say, okay, you know, use this company and it's a certain amount per month with this interest, blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
Again, going back to, you know, the lady you're talking about, I don't have a problem if you do that. That's on you.
Mhm.
I can't consciously feel like you need to pay a premium, you know, just to use, you know, a service to get a gutter that you need on your house or
Yeah.
whatnot. So
Right.
anyhow, it's thinking about that.
Well,
person.
I think people should be able to trust Christian business people, not because they're Christian,
Yeah.
but because they're trustworthy.
Right.
You
Right.
know, that should go hand in hand. Doesn't always go hand in
Mhm.
hand.
Nope.
And I think if you're going, we have to be careful. Just like you're in the ministry, there's a lot of eyes on you.
Life in the fishbowl.
Do you know what I mean? All the time.
Yeah.
And, you know, be wary of that when you have children, if you may have children one day. They're going to be in that same fishbowl too. You know,
Yeah. That's the pastor's kid.
it puts a lot of it on it, a lot of
bad
pressure
kids.
on you.
Yeah. No.
But you were
here.
called, you know,
Yeah.
and we were called into business, and we should be conscientious of that at all times. And I think that should be an encouragement to us, but that we have to live consistently. It's so vital that we have these spiritual disciplines that we talked about. It's not that we're never going to mess up.
Mm.
It's not ever that we're going to have a ping on our reputation that's well deserved. Do you know what I'm saying? We're going to
Yeah.
mess up.
Oh,
We're going to
yeah.
it's not always because, you know, we're being dodgy or something. Something's going to fall through the cracks at some point, and that's going to take a ding on us. It's then what we do through these spiritual disciplines that
Yeah.
allows us to recover and allows us to restore those relationships. I think I've heard a lot of that from Christian business that's unique to others, is that if they fail a customer, they try to restore that relationship.
Yeah.
Just like in a Christian relationship that we should have. And that changes how you do business. It changes. We talked about this at the very beginning. It was like this podcast, it might be hard to promote. It's a lot easier to promote a podcast that says, I can make you a millionaire this year, right?
Mhm.
It's
Right.
harder to say, hey, we want you to run a wise, spiritually focused
Right.
business that's not going to be as profitable as some of the
Yeah.
other places out there that you might run.
And all the millionaires that see that title know it's not true.
Yeah, what title? Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Make you millionaire in a year. Everyone
Yeah.
who's done it's like,
Not gonna
exactly.
happen. Yeah.
You know,
something else that I was thinking when you're talking about spiritual disciplines is, you know, there's been a lot of talk recently about habits and like having godly habits.
Mhm.
And I think it was a counseling assignment that I had to read, but he was talking about how sanctification is, you know, this is the process of becoming more like Jesus. Sanctification is just learning how to build spiritual habits in your life. And, you know, if you're going to be a business owner, then one of the things you have to be is consistent. And that goes for spiritually too. And when it comes to, I think, and sometimes it's maybe kind of intimidating to like, to look at, okay, here's what I want to do, but I don't know how to get there. But like the good news is, hey, just start small and start today, you know?
Oh, yeah.
And when it comes to, and in your spiritual life, you know, becoming a prayer warrior, everyone who became a prayer warrior started by doing something today, and then they do it tomorrow.
yeah.
And then what happens is, you know, that habit muscle, if you will,
Yeah.
it gets stronger.
Yes.
You know, you in business, you look at what you can do today versus if you've been doing the same thing for several years versus what you could do when you start.
Sure.
It's like, wow, this is so different. Well, it's the same spiritually.
Yeah.
And over time that, you know, you get stronger. And I like to use the illustration of, this is not original with me, but you have cups of willpower that you say you have 10 cups of willpower every day. Just picture, you know, glass cups. And when you try to start something new, you are filling up 8 of those cups. Okay, say you want to start a new fitness routine. Okay, so that's really hard to do at first. You've got 8 of those cups filled, but over time, as you consistently get better, you get to lighten up one of those cups. So now it's like you're trying to start something new. So you have 8 of the cups full when you're starting, but then after that habit starts to take hold, now you have 7 cups full, and you keep doing it, and then 6 cups. And then what happens when you get that extra willpower back is then you can reinvest. Same with money, right? And then you can reinvest that into another thing that you want to grow and develop. And one of the guys that I listen to talks about how, when you look at somebody who's like super good at something, they're super accomplished, you're like, man, how did you do all that? But he's like, well, at the end of the day, this is just condensed periods of focus for a certain amount of time. And then, as I build these habits or whatever, I switch to something new, and I just keep doing that over time. And the result is something that's really powerful, And so it's the same spiritually. Sure. You don't start by being able to read the Bible and just understand what this word and that word means. It's because it's frustrating. And,
right.
You can only read some of the easier portions at first. And but over time, you keep at it, keep being around those kinds of people. Yep. Over time, you build those habits. And what's cool is then what happens is then your subconscious takes over. The more you work on letting the Holy Spirit work through you when you're tempted to have an anger issue or tempted to just take it out on somebody, the more it becomes a habit to hold your tongue.
Yeah.
But a lot of times we don't work on every area, and we're not perfect. But over time, what happens is your subconscious takes over. Now you don't have to really focus on that fitness routine or that spiritual discipline because your subconscious kicks in and tend to do it. And
sure.
I use I got this from Charles Duhigg, wrote The Power Habit. And in his book, he used the illustration of a guy who he had like a brain injury, but even though he had his brain injury, he still went for a walk around the same area in his neighborhood. And the part of it was like something to do with that brain injury was his memory. So he couldn't remember something, but the subconscious part of his brain was still intact that automatically took him on the same route in the walk. And so what that teaches us is, when you do something consistent over time, your subconscious kicks in. You don't even have to put in the effort to the same level anymore. The downside of that is you stop improving because if you're not consistently being intentional. But the upside is, man, it's crazy what you can do if you're just intentional and you let that habit build into your life, spiritually and in business. And so, yeah, it's kind of
cool. There's a concept that they use the example of driving. When you're intentional and knowing where you're going and making turns and things like that, and it's a new place, it requires a different part of your brain. It's those alpha waves. If you drive in the same route every single day to work, you go into those beta waves, which is where that subconscious, muscle memory is.
Yeah.
And in fact, they found you're a safer driver driving in your subconscious than you are driving in your alpha.
No kidding.
Because you make more mistakes in those alpha hyper aware. Because,
Yeah.
we've all done it. We've probably driven the same way home, and you look up and you go, oh,
That's
how did I get
100%
here?
what I was just. I was literally just thinking that as you were talking.
How did I get here?
You're like, oh, did I run through a red light?
Yep.
I do not remember any of them on the way here. But somehow you managed to drive an hour, or 30 minutes or whatever.
But you're right. More things that we can drive from that alpha, that hyper focused decision making, hard, difficult tasks that are new or that we're trying to overcome. The more we can drive them into those beta waves, more things we can use that other cup of willpower to pour into those alphas. The more we can drive into that subconscious, the better it is. It's just habit. I've been convicted about my prayer life throughout the day. I've been challenged with it over and over again. And I think as a business, we ought to look when those times, especially in business, we don't pray almost on purpose because we go, I got this. I can fix this. I got it. But if we just stop and pray, look for opportunities to pray, God will prompt you. And just pray throughout the day. Well, I think what that does to not just focus you, but connects you to your Creator in a personal way, that every decision that you start making is together with the Lord and listening to Him, how He's leading, if you take that time to actually stop. And it goes back to that busyness principle of being intentional and unwilling to do what needs to be done. A lot of times we're just unwilling to pray, like we don't want to ask for help. I'll go to God when things get really, really bad and I need a miracle, right? Stop asking for miracles. I mean, how many times did Jesus say, stop asking, you hypocrites, look for a sign. You keep asking for a sign. I'm standing right here. That's all you need.
Yeah.
You know, what more do you want? God's right there for us.
Yeah.
Every single time.
I was just telling Michael yesterday that I was talking to the girls on the way to take them to school about, one of them said, does God talk to you? I said, well, yeah. And I said, maybe not audibly does he talk to everybody. Maybe he does. I don't know. I've never feel like I've audibly heard him. I said, but why can we not hear him audibly? And so I started talking real low. And one of them had their cup in the front. And I was like, Kinley, can you move your cup to the back? And it was real low. And she's like, what? You saying I love you? I'm like, and I just kept saying it. And I said, why do you think you can't hear me? So I turned the radio down. I turned the AC off in the truck. And then I said it again the same rate and the same sound, height, whatever. And she heard it. I said, it's because we turned off all the distractions, and I started to focus.
That's good.
I said, if you want to hear God, you may not hear him audibly, but you got to get the distractions out,
Yep.
And you'll start to feel it inside of you.
Yep.
And he's there talking.
Sometimes the hardest thing to do as an entrepreneur is to be still.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's still your mind,
Mm-hmm.
still yourself, and just listen. That's difficult. But I think that's in those moments where we surrender to be able to do that I think God just reaches down and does miraculous things.
Absolutely.
Over and over
I was talking to a pastor friend the other day, and he's teaching through Acts, and he's talking about, and big thing when you preach through Acts is how you address miracles and what's the purpose of miracles and why does God still do them today, and can my grandma be healed, right? That's kind of the big thing. But he said that one thing he was teaching through is the miracles and the miraculous always follows the mundane.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's a good point. A lot of times we expect God to, flip this light twice if I'm supposed to do this or that.
Yeah.
And when in reality, how has God revealed himself? Well, he's given us his word.
Mm-hmm.
And today we have access to it like never before on our phones, Bibles are everywhere. And that's how he communicates to us. And so it's just interesting to think about, it's a lot of times, man, it is in the mundane, the day to day, day in, day out. And then, when you're talking about praying, and in 1 Thessalonians 5:16, the Bible says, pray without ceasing.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the illustration I like to use with that is like a leaky faucet.
Yeah.
If a faucet's leaking, it's like drip, 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 drip. So what does that look like throughout our days? Allowing things to prompt us to pray, like when you're anxious, prompting you to pray. It's funny because like when I was in college, I was, I like wanted to be in a relationship, and I had friends that were in relationships, and sometimes I was like, man, why don't I have that? And one of the things I worked on doing was that thought of why don't I have that, making that a spiritual habit loop of, okay, now I'm going to pray for my friends' relationships when I'm wondering why I don't have that relationship, And so setting little things like that throughout your day to cause you to pray.
Sure.
One of the things I tell the middle schoolers is, hey, on the way to school, be talking to God. On the way home from school, be talking to God. Some of those little things, and teach them how to pray without ceasing. And you got to be intentional with it. It doesn't just happen. But another thing I taught today at a Bible study earlier was if you want to know how prideful you are, ask yourself how much you pray. Because literally, to your point, prayer is releasing ownership and ability to God, saying,
Absolutely.
God, you do this through me.
Yeah.
I can't do this.
Yeah.
Like I was telling the kids, I was teaching out in Gulf Breeze today, a Bible study we do, and I was like, guys, honestly, like a lot of times I forget. I forget to pray. And, while I may not try to be prideful, my actions are prideful because I'm saying I got this on my own versus, that. And it takes intentionality, but
Sure.
going to God and, when you do go to him in prayer, you're actively saying, I can't do this.
Yeah.
Can you?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being with us. We really enjoyed this. I love when our podcasts turn into church.
Absolutely. It's always the best ones.
It's so great. And I know if you're listening to this, there are so many things that we've talked about that can have a massive impact in your business and in your life and the lives of your family. Concentrate on developing those spiritual disciplines that are going to have long-term benefits in your relationship with God, but also in your business. And they're things that God calls us to obedience to do anyway. We haven't talked about anything that's new that we just invented this year, right? It's been laid out in Scripture for us time and time again. And the great thing is He is faithful when we obey. He's faithful to bless us. He is faithful to guide us. He is faithful to be there every time. So challenge God in that way. Be faithful to him and what he's called you to do. He will be faithful to you in return. So I'd like to have you back on again.
It's fun.
Sure,
Yeah,
it's
thank
awesome.
you guys.
Yeah,
Enjoyed
it's
it.
been
Maybe we'll bump your podcast up to 68.
There we go.
That'd be awesome. There,
That's right.
we can have it listed. So thank you guys for joining us again on the ARC Entrepreneurs Podcast.
Follow us on Facebook or Instagram at the ARC Podcast, TikTok at ARC Podcast, or YouTube at the ARC Entrepreneur Podcast.
Yeah, and reach out to us and go to our website, thearcpodcast.com. You can subscribe, you can contact us, and leave a comment.
And tune in every Sunday at 10 a.m. at 103.7 or 790 a.m. WPNN, and every Monday on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts at the ARC Entrepreneur Podcast.